Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today we're going to have so much fun because we're going to be talking about how to make sure that your business can survive a crisis, how to even build a business. Maybe you've got a business and you need to make it, shall we say, and shall we know we need to do this? Grow, all of these various things. So we're going to have so much fun today talking with Tony Guarnaccia. So welcome, Tony.
Hi, thanks for having me here today. So excited to be on your show.
Great. Well, let me tell people just a little bit about you. So Tony Guarnaccia is widely recognized as an authority on digital marketing and has grown over 10,000 small businesses and a dozen Fortune 500 companies, including ADP, Ford, and AutoNation. Tony has managed over $400 million in advertising spend, and in 2009 earned the prestigious title of Holy Schmoly Google Partner of the Year. Later, Tony returned to his entrepreneur roots and founded Big Fish Results, Results Trained, and the Results Club to bring the same strategy, tactics, and resources normally reserved for larger enterprises to small business. He believes that by growing small businesses, together we can impact not only just our local communities, but also our world. So again, Tony, welcome.
Thanks so much.
Great. Well, I always like to have people tell us a little bit about how they got to where they are today and how they discovered their passion in life. So you've got a very interesting story about where how you've gotten here. So give us a little bit of that.
Yeah, so my story and my really mission and purpose in life started when I was just 12 years old.
Okay.
And so my parents had a bakery, and they were amazing bakers, the best. Unfortunately, they know what they know about growing a business.
Right.
And so our bakery at the age of 12, it failed, lost everything, lost the house, the car, even had to give my dog to one of my older sisters. And so it was a real challenging time. And that kind of set the precedence, though, of where I was going to go. Because I remember sitting in a basement because I had to move into my oldest sister's basement until we kind of regrouped. And I remember sitting there doing my homework and thinking, this is not my plan. This is not for me, and so that kind of always sat with me up until this day, even. And so years later, we did regain our footing. I went to college and studied business and part of my entrepreneurship, as a matter of fact. And then as part of my graduation, I had to write a business plan. And so I wrote a business plan for one of the first online bakeries. So looking back now, I'm kind of realizing it was kind of like a redemption type story. So I went back, started a bakery, and we were the first bakery that could take, and probably the only, I don't even think people do this today, but I could take a cake, put a photo on it, like the photo cakes you see in the grocery stores,
right,
and mail it anywhere in the country.
Wow.
And have it arrive perfectly. And so because of that, it was so innovative. Nobody had anything like it. People really used it for two purposes. One, as a gift, your kids in college, you mail them a cake with fluffy on it.
Ship them this cool cake.
Exactly. And then we also did a promotional products company. And so we were able to put logos of, Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, all these amazing companies we ended up shipping cakes to, and also celebrities, Jennifer Lopez, Jay-Z. I remember thinking, at this point, further on, I was in my mid-20s. I'm thinking, wow, entrepreneurship is easy. What were my parents missing? And that's when I realized
how'd they mess up.
And that's when I realized that I didn't know what I didn't know about growing a business and lost everything again. So thankfully, I have lots of sisters. I had to move in my other sister's basement with my wife. I was newly married, had a baby on the way. And I said to myself, I don't know what I'm doing, but who does? And that's what started me on my journey for over a decade, working with some of the best companies in the world, because I wanted to go work with them, really learn what they did. And then ultimately, I later went back to kind of my entrepreneurial roots, as we mentioned, to help others based off of what I learned working with these great companies like Google and ADP and Ford, all these amazing companies.
Right. I love it. And, it was interesting reading your information because, it's out there, warts and all. A lot of business owners would never want anybody to know that they hadn't been successful. And of course, we learn the most quite often from when we fail.
Correct.
And of course, the thing that we learn, that we hopefully learn, is not to do that again. But sometimes we do. I mean, there are things that happen. And so you've built this great business, and you've got several books out. You have one that's getting ready to come out. But I noticed on your website you talk about how to democratize marketing.
Yes.
And that really caught my attention. So tell me more about what you mean about that.
Yeah. So the idea of democratized marketing really starts before even that concept. It starts with what I call the marketing revolution.
Okay.
And so if you look at, years ago, 40, 50 years ago, or even sooner, frankly, advertising, marketing used to be easier.
Right.
You run an ad in a paper, boom, you get some business.
There was one paper, there were two TV stations, right?
Exactly. Very simple. Then all of a sudden, broadcast comes, it gets more complicated. You get cable where there's, more and more channels and, things are getting more and more complex. Then all of a sudden, what happens? You have the internet, and it's so much that you need a directory, Yahoo, back. If anyone remembers this, you need Yahoo to organize it. Then you have search engines, Alta Vista, Lycos, all these ones, which is where I started. I started way back in the late 90s working with those. And then all of a sudden you have Google come along, more and more complications, right? Then all of a sudden you have social media. So people are creating their own content. So there's even more, exponentially more content out there. And then today, it's where not just the content is produced at exponential scale, the consumption of it is as well.
Right.
So now as a small business owner or even a big company, you're not just competing with your competitors, you're competing for attention. You're competing against Netflix and YouTube and Amazon. So how do you stand out? And so these are all the fundamental problems, and democratizing marketing addresses those, which there are really three primary ones. Number one, there's so much out there that it's really hard to stand out, and it's hard to choose which channel will work.
Right.
I call that fragmentation. So things get more and more fragmented as time evolves. Secondly, once you find a channel that actually works, so say there's a million channels, you found the one that actually works.
Right.
How do you actually stand out? Because then you have a messaging problem because there's so much clutter. So although there's so many channels, even within the channels, it's busy. So it's cluttered. And then the final one, which, maybe I can get past the first one. I find something that works. Maybe I get past the second challenge, which, I have a message that stands out. The third one that can get me is the technology.
Right.
So now I have to need code and websites and pixels and data and tracking. So how does the average small business owner have a chance? Even the big companies. I mean, I was at a Harvard seminar with some of the top CMOs in the country. Big, Oracle, Dunkin' Donuts, all these amazing brands. And even the CMOs were a little nervous. Now, this was 10 years ago, but they didn't really know what was going on either. And so my whole idea of democratizing marketing is to help empower the small businesses to overcome those challenges so that it's more of a level playing field.
Right. And it is complicated if you're a small business owner, because first of all, you're just trying to do your business. You're doing whatever it is that you do. But then when you're trying to figure out, should I be on Facebook? Should I do a billboard? Should I do a direct mail paste? What about my website? I mean, all these various things. And so what happens is analysis or paralysis by analysis.
Right.
You end up not doing anything. So how do you work with businesses for them to figure out how to get through that clutter?
Yeah. So the fundamental challenge really can be broken down to another framework I created, which I learned, I mentioned this before we jumped on here, about my mother and the lessons I learned about how to overcome any challenge. And so what she taught me through her battle with polio, at first she wasn't able to, this is in the manifesto I talked about before, but at first she couldn't walk, and her vision was to be able to wear high heels someday. That was always kind of what was in her mind. And so
Every little girl wants to do that.
exactly. But when you can't walk,
Mhm.
even more of a challenge.
Right.
And
Mhm.
so when she was at the hospital, they started off with, exercises to grow her
Mhm.
strength. She
Mhm.
was able to, work with clay,
Mhm.
and that improved her nervous system to the
Mhm.
point where she was able to then go in a pool, build some strength,
Mhm.
and then finally walk between two poles.
Mhm.
And what I learned from her is something that I apply today. And
Mhm.
what she taught me was to accomplish anything, you
Mhm.
have to be able to break things down.
Right.
And that was kind of the building blocks that
Mhm.
helped me build the systems I built today.
Mhm.
But I kind of took it to another level when I realized it's not just knowing, how to do things, or it's really three things are necessary. You have to identify what has to be done. So
Mhm.
the what has to be done.
Mhm.
Then you have to understand it. So know how to do it.
Mhm.
And then finally, you have to actually take action. And
Right.
so whatever challenge you're facing in business or in life,
Mhm.
but specific to business, because we're talking about that, you
Mhm.
have to first identify what needs to be done,
Mhm.
understand how to do it, and then take action.
Right.
Most small business owners, from my experience, focus on the how.
Mhm.
How do I do PR? How do I
Right.
do a podcast? How do I do
Mhm.
SEO? Without first asking the question, what do I have to do? And more
Right.
importantly, why am I doing it?
Yeah. Do I even need to?
Correct. And in the corporate world, what they call that, and which is why I never talk about this till later on, but
Mhm.
the crazy scary word is strategic planning.
Mhm.
Most enterprises, if you go and work with them, which I have,
Mhm.
you'll be in a room with 20 people.
Mhm.
They'll have a spreadsheet 20 tabs long,
Mhm.
and they're going to work for weeks on a time figuring out what they're going to do,
Mhm.
contingency plans. If this happens, we're going to do this. If
Mhm.
that happens, we're going to do that. And the sad thing is, most business owners spend more time planning their vacation,
Mhm.
their birthday,
Right.
their weddings,
Mhm.
than they do their life and their business.
Mhm.
And so I create a framework to help make that much
Mhm.
easier so anyone can do it. And
Right.
so that's my solution for this challenge, to
Mhm.
kind of circle back to your original question,
Mhm.
like, what do you do with the fragmentation, the
Mhm.
clutter, and all the, you have to have a strategic plan.
Right.
And
Right.
that's why I call it the results loop.
Mhm. Right. And so many times what we do is the bright, shiny object.
Yep.
Whatever is latest and greatest, we're going to try. And the bad part is by doing that, we're getting rid of sometimes because money and time are finite.
Right.
And so we might be getting rid of great ways, or the perfect way even, that we were reaching our customers to go after whatever the next bright shiny object is.
Yes.
I focus a lot on social media, and people, TikTok is one of the latest and greatest. Nope, not going to do it. I mean, it looks fun, and I would go down that rabbit hole, and there I'd be lost. And or I have business owners who come up to me and they say, when we could actually meet in person,
Mm.
and they would say, "Oh my gosh, I need to be on LinkedIn. I need to be on Facebook. I need to be on Instagram. I need to be on Twitter, and I need to blah, 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 blah." And I tell them, no, stop.
Right.
One, pick
Correct.
one. And I tell them, pick the one that you like to start with. Now it might not be the best one, but because they like it, they're going to enjoy it more, maybe. But yeah, we need to learn, like you said, we need to take it in a small chunk, because if we're going to do all social media, you can't. I mean, there's
Right.
there's just absolutely no way. Same with any of the things. Now probably the first thing that from a marketing perspective that somebody really needs to do is a website. You need to be, but it can be basic. I mean, it doesn't have to be this 900-page thing that answers everything. It can be one page. Depending on what you do, maybe you just need to say, here's what I do and here's how to reach me.
Yeah,
You
well,
know.
and going back to my mother's story, that's
Mhm.
kind of that's where I came up with the name for my book.
Mhm.
So the book is Small Steps to Grow
Right.
Profit. So my
Mhm.
mother epitomized that. Like, she
Mhm.
literally had to take small
Right.
steps to be able to
Mhm.
walk today. But
Mhm.
it's the same lesson we can all apply to ourselves.
Mhm.
Just take one little thing
Mhm.
and make progress in that one little area each day. By the end of the year, you'll
Mhm.
have exponential
Right.
growth. You have to just take the small steps every
Mhm.
day. That way you're not getting overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And that way you're actually making progress each and every day towards your goal.
Right. It's fun. I always ask my guests to provide me with a quote. I'm going to get my paper out here just so that I make sure I read it right. And normally I don't read them on the air because we've used them as promotion. But I love this, and it's so great because it's exactly what we're talking about here. Because you say, in order to grow,
Yes.
you may need to slow down in order to speed up. And I
Correct.
love that concept. So tell us, I mean, that is what we're talking about, because when you are doing things, a step at a time,
Yeah.
you're having to slow down.
Yeah. So that lesson I learned, which is similar to what my mother taught me, but I learned it from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in college, I mentioned before I studied entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
I was also a music major.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the conservatory, I studied violin.
Mm.
And so I was learning from one of the great violinists
Mm-hmm.
today. He played at Carnegie Hall and it's got recordings with Sony,
Wow.
the whole
Mm-hmm.
bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I'm 19 years old or something. And I'm learning one of the more difficult violin pieces called the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I am playing this, and me, which is a lot like us today, I want to skip over the hard notes and just
Right.
get down to the fun stuff, the
Mhm.
melodies. Let me play that, and then I'm
Mhm,
going to skirt over the hard stuff again.
mhm,
And I remember my teacher teaching me that you have to slow down. You have to
mhm.
play each note very diligently,
Right.
learn it, and then speed it up, and
Mhm.
then you're actually going to get to where you
Mhm.
want to be. Otherwise, you're just fluffing it, and you're never
Right.
actually going to be able to play the piece
Mhm.
to any kind of level. And so that's what I learned from him, is what I
Mhm.
apply to everything I do,
Mhm.
both in business and in life, because when you slow down, you take a moment, and this goes,
Mhm.
from business perspective, back to the idea of strategic planning. You
Right.
have to have a strategy and plan.
Mhm.
Most people don't want to do that
Mhm.
because, it's expensive. It
Right.
can take a lot of time, maybe you
Or
don't
we
know
do it
how.
and it sits on the bookshelf behind us, right? In the
Exactly.
big fancy binder that gets more dust than anything.
Exactly. And that's when I thought, okay, how do I fix that problem?
Mhm.
And so that's why, going back to results loop, that's why I created that, because
Mhm.
I wanted to create a system that's easy to understand, simple to execute, that anyone can
Mhm.
do. And I literally think I accomplished that, because before the pandemic hit,
Mhm.
my daughter is a Girl Scout. I
Mm.
actually took her Girl Scout troop through the results loop,
Mhm.
and they were able to dramatically increase their Girl Scout cookie sales just by
Cool.
going through this process. So
Mhm.
my point is anyone can do it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
these
except
girls,
Girl Scouts are pretty smart.
they're well, what's amazing about the Girl Scouts though, they all are entrepreneurs at heart. I would
Right.
say probably 50-60%
Mhm.
of them, when I
Mhm.
asked them, hey, would you ever want to do your own business?
Mhm.
It was amazing because so many of them did.
Mhm.
And what we did while I did this Girl Scout cookie, I had them do a second results loop, and they
Mm.
made one for a cookie business. Another one
Mhm.
did like a bakery, a pet
Mhm.
shop, a veterinarian. It was so fascinating to see
I bet.
passion just at that
Mhm.
young age of
Mhm.
what you can do. And they already have a game plan on how
Mhm.
to get there.
Right. And for the most part, it won't be what they end up going into,
Yeah.
but you've already set that foundation.
Yes.
And I think that's the other thing that so many people forget when we get caught up in this squirrel wheel or, hamster wheel, I guess it would be, of following the next bright, shiny object, is
Yeah.
we forget the basics.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm always asking people is, who is your perfect client? Or not even your
Yes.
perfect client, who is your ideal, all
Yeah.
those various things. And, I always love it when they look at me and they smile sweetly and they say, everyone.
Yes.
And it's like,
Yes.
no,
Yeah.
no, and I don't care what business you are. Everyone is not your client.
Correct.
Doesn't matter what you have. There's still the perfect thing that,
Yeah.
or the perfect person, whether it's age, whether it's sex, whether it's demographics, that is demographics, but, all of those various things. And so that's part of that slow down,
Yeah.
stop and figure out who the heck you're trying to contact and reach.
Yeah, that's actually the first step within the results loop, is to
Mhm.
identify your markets.
Mhm.
And I think where people get stuck sometimes is they don't know how to do that. So you mentioned a
Right.
couple of areas. You
Mhm.
look at their demographics, etc. What I found, there's a couple of ways that makes it really simple. You
Mhm.
can start with your customers you have today. So the
Mhm.
first thing I usually have
Right.
people do is go through, make a list, and just find any similar characteristics.
Mhm.
Do they have a similar need?
Mhm.
Are they in a similar location?
Mhm.
Maybe they're in one zip code versus
Mhm.
another. Is there demographics do
Mhm.
make sense? Can you segment it that way? But always starting from there, and
Mhm.
keeping in mind that what you do is you're solving a problem. So
Right.
what people are buying is not your product or service, but the end
Mhm.
result of what that product or service delivers.
Mhm.
So start there and say, okay, what are they actually buying? Is there
Mhm.
a difference? Because
Right.
no matter what, like you said, it could be the most kind of ubiquitous product,
Mhm.
Coca-Cola, right? You're in
Right.
Georgia,
Mhm.
Coca-Cola. You would think they have the whole market, right?
Mhm.
Everybody has Coke. Well, guess what?
Right.
There's Pepsi,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
huge.
I
So,
mean, there are people who will not drink a Coca-Cola. If they
correct.
go into a restaurant and they're told, they say, I'd like a Pepsi, and they say, we have Coke. They're like, no, I
Yeah.
have water.
Exactly. So you do not have the whole, so even they have to segment their market in some way. So that's the first step, because not only will it help you accomplish your goals better, because you can perceive it. You know, you can't accomplish something you can't even define. So you have to first define what that is, but then also your marketing becomes more powerful because you're speaking to that audience.
Right.
Everything starts with your markets. And then married to that is factor number 2, which are your products and services. So those are very closely married. And one of the secrets to growth, depending on what you want to do, whether you want to pivot or you want to scale, you want to, what I do is I do what's called the Ansom Matrix. So I combine the markets on a table compared to the products and services. And I say, okay, what new products can I give to new markets? What existing products can I give to new markets? What existing products can I give to existing markets? And so you make this little 4 quadrant, and it kind of gives you a way to brainstorm how you can grow next.
Right. Yeah. And as you were saying this, I was thinking Girl Scout cookies is a great example of this because, first of all, not everybody likes cookies, gasp.
Yeah.
But not everybody likes cookies, but like you were saying, sometimes it's what they're getting, so it's not just that they're getting the cookie, they're helping the girls. When they're telling me, okay, for every box you buy, we donate a box. I mean, all of the, or I don't even have to take the cookies. Maybe I don't like cookies, but I can buy cookies to be donated. A lot of times they send them overseas, things like that. So that's great. But it's funny because anytime I have, especially a child, if they're going to now I am a Girl Scout, if you can't tell. I'm a lifetime member. Have I been active? No, but I, way back I sold cookies. But I have this philosophy, whether you're selling me cookies, whether you're selling me magazines, whatever the kid is selling, I almost always make the child talk to me. So it's not the parent. No, I'm not buying from the parent. And I make them tell me, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
And it's so funny because you get such a variety of answers. And usually if they can give me any answer at all, I'm happy. But, because sometimes they're like, hey, we're going on a trip. Or, or we're buying band uniforms or whatever it is. But the child themselves has to be able to tell me what their goal is. And I think that's so important when we're getting our product ready. What is it that somebody is actually getting from us?
Yeah. And where I started with the Girl Scouts is just to give you the actual illustration with the markets and say, okay, well, who are your markets? Who do you sell to? Well, they
went everybody.
They did initially, but then I just asked a couple questions. Well, where do you start? Mom and dad. Great. Do you have a neighborhood? Okay, mark that down. Someone came up with the idea, we go outside of the local grocery store. And why this is powerful is it makes sure you have a checklist so you don't miss any, but it also drives brainstorming because one little girl happened to sell a lot through her mother's yoga studio. And then someone else said, well, you know what? My mom also goes to a yoga studio. It's a different one. Maybe I should go there. So starting with your markets is very, very powerful because it gives you ideas. And when you write it down, it gives you kind of vision for it. And then marrying that to your products and services, the question I asked, I said, okay, because I always start where you have success. Success is a good indicator of where to go. I said, okay, what are your best selling products? Well, let's see. Thin mints. Samoas, right? So what do you start? What's the first thing you ask someone to buy? And so I'm giving the girls the sales scripts.
Well, they've got that box of Thin Mints and they say, they don't say, do you want to buy Girl Scout cookies? Do you want to buy a box of Thin Mints?
Correct. And then the next concept, which we'll talk about later as we go around the loop of increasing lifetime value, the size, I said, well, once they buy the first cookie, ask them to buy the second one, and maybe the third one, put in one of the least popular ones, because once someone has a pattern of buying, they want to buy more and more. And so that was kind of the process we started. So that's factor number 1 is your markets. Factor number 2 is your products and services.
Right. And then of course there is your messaging, because that is, and it does change, when you're selling something to mom and dad, there's no message. Mom and dad just buy it. They know they have to buy a case of cookies. And if you call grandma's going to buy, a box or 2 of cookies, whatever. But it is different slightly, like back when I was selling Girl Scout cookies, now I grew up in the mountains of Colorado. So, we could go door to door easily. There wasn't problems with that. I went to the ranches. because the ranches would buy cases
Yeah.
of cookies and freeze them. And because they had, that was something that they could easily get out to feed every day for their ranch hands, all of those things. And so, that was my message was, do you want to be able to have something easy to give to the guys when they come in after, branding, you've got cookies and milk for them, and of course they laughed at that, but they bought the cookies, and so, it's a matter of doing that and then fine tuning it. That's the other thing is, or changing it. I mean, now back to the cookie thing. I think they sell gluten-free cookies. I'm pretty sure they did this year. But they've had to add some things to keep up with what, is going on.
Yeah. Well, and that goes into factor number 3, which I call value. So value is the transformation you're providing. So again, people aren't buying your product and services.
Right.
They're buying the result of them. And so from a messaging standpoint, that's kind of the last stage. So the value is kind of what you're actually delivering. And there's two kinds of value, just to not to get too deep into this, but there's the real value, which is the cookie.
Right.
It tastes
you
good.
Get the cookie. You get to eat the cookie.
Exactly. And then you have the perceived value, which is everything that's wrapped around that. It could be the packaging, could be the donations, all that. And so that eventually is what goes into your messaging. So that is really critical because, to your point, people won't necessarily buy it just for the cookie. Maybe they don't like cookies, but there's other benefits, and you want to make sure you're expounding upon those.
Right. And it's interesting as a marketing person to have watched things through the years. I mean, you mentioned Coca-Cola. You might not, you've probably seen it, but I don't think you're old enough to remember the original version of when they came out and they all held hands and they sang, "I'd like to teach the world to sing."
Yes, I remember.
Had nothing to do with the product.
Correct.
But we all went, oh.
Yeah.
And we bought Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Budweiser is probably one of the greatest examples of that. Those horses, those Clydesdales, are not selling beer, but they're selling that emotion.
Yes.
Especially when, the little pony runs off or they raise the dog or, all of those various things that they've done with the Budweiser commercials. I mean, it's almost like you're un-American if you don't buy Budweiser beer because, you're going against the Clydesdales. How can you do that?
Exactly. Yeah. It's so powerful. And it's the part that really can be what drives a campaign to the next level is having that, because you're right. People buy really because of the emotion and they justify it from their intellect, and so you got to start with the emotion.
Right.
And stories are probably the most powerful way to do that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's one of the reasons I focus a lot on stories in my manifesto and everywhere else, because stories really hit you at a deeper level of consciousness and help, from a persuasion perspective, can't be beat.
Right. Yeah, because even if we personally haven't gone through it, in many cases, we can still empathize with it, understand it, all of those things. You mentioned your mom and her polio. You talk a lot about that and how you learn from that. It's not anything that the vast majority of people have gone through, but they have known someone or themselves who have had challenges like that. So then they're able to go, oh yeah, that's me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so powerful because stories, just like I said, goes down to a deeper level. It makes you more relatable. It's just, that's something I always work with people on, is trying to get a story to don't just tell what you do. And that's been a challenge for me. It's something I've had to learn because I'm very analytical. I'm more a dollar.
You're a musician.
I like to have, everything kind of laid out and very strategic, but I've learned to put more emotion to things and really be more transparent, which is uncomfortable. Like it's not always fun to say, oh yeah, I was bankrupt and lost everything, but you want to have that because maybe someone else has that problem. You can help them out.
Right. And that's, of course, how small business owners, because they're going, oh my gosh, I don't have the budget that a Coca-Cola would have, or even that the Girl Scouts would have, or anything like that. But that's where they tell those stories. I remember several years ago, I was at a networking thing, and you had to get up and give your 30-second spiel, and those fun little things that we all just and you can't even say what the person next to you just said because you weren't paying attention. And one of the gentlemen sold life insurance, and he got up and he told the story about a friend of theirs, and this was true. I mean, and of course that's the other thing is, is it true? Are you fudging? I mean, okay, we're not going to get into those details, but this was somebody he actually knew, whose husband passed away very suddenly, no life insurance because he was young. I mean, you don't stop to think you need life insurance until you're my age. And the wife lost everything because there was no life insurance. And I still remember he's telling this story and one solitary little tear because he knew that person. And we're all like, we need life insurance. We need life insurance because we didn't want our family to have to go through the same thing. And so that's a great example of how a small business can tell a story. And, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's something very simple. Like, you sell widgets and you just tell how that widget solves that problem for a specific person.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you can, one of the best books I've read on that subject is really Donald Miller, Story Brand. He's got a fantastic framework, which, it's something we all learn in grade school. It's called the hero's journey.
Right.
But if you can kind of take, your own example, your story, and put it through this framework or where you started, what was the transformation, who helped you get there, all, what happens if you have success, what happens if you don't. It's very simple. And you can put together a story, it doesn't have to be a long process. You can put it together in 15 minutes.
Right. And obviously you tweak it because, there are things, and you also don't want to be exploitive. Many years ago, I worked for the American Cancer Society, and that was one of the things we had to be very careful with when we were sharing stories of the people that had cancer, because we didn't want it to be like we were taking advantage of them or that we were exploiting, what they had gone through. So, we did have to be very careful with that. And there were just some where we would say, we just can't, that's why, especially like at this time of year, we see, the St. Jude's cancer, because you see a little kid that's in the hospital this time of year, like, okay, how much can I write that check for?
Right.
But again, as a small business owner, there are ways to tell those stories so that they're, again, people can put themselves in your shoes.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's so important.
Yeah. Well, now we've got this thing called the pandemic. We were going merrily along, businesses were growing, and you're still talking about how to grow your business during a pandemic. And, and I love that concept because I think so many people went, oh, we have to stop. No, can't, and now might be the best time to be doing this. So talk about that. Talk about how you're really helping people get through this.
Yeah. So the powerful thing about the framework I created is it can be used in any situation. So you can use it for scaling, which is really originally my thought of why I created it, but it can also be used for pivoting. And so I used it myself. And so I have an agency called Big Fish Results that you mentioned. And we happen to have a lot of clients in travel and events, pretty much. So I was like, okay. Sometimes I always feel like if God wants to teach you a lesson in resilience, you have to actually go through it yourself.
Right.
And so if I'm going to be teaching about resilient, I have to myself be a resilient. And so I took myself through the results loop and I said, okay, a lot of the markets we're serving are declining because my agency, we lost, probably 80% of our revenue at least. And so we had to pivot. And I said, okay, well, what markets are actually growing? Well, gee whiz, looks like podcasts are doing okay. Looks like virtual whatever is doing okay. Zoom doesn't seem to be hurting too bad with their stock. So let's go into something virtual. So that's where I started. Say, okay, the market I want to serve are people in virtual. And then I said, okay, what products and services they need? Well, before all this started, I started doing a lot of guest podcasting like we're doing here today. And I noticed that the process was not fantastic on many sides.
Right.
And so I said, okay, I'm pretty good at marketing. Most people that have podcasts are not good marketers. You are obviously, but most people, a lot of people do it for hobbies. They just don't have a marketing background. So that seems like a problem that I can help solve. And I always start with the problem. Like you don't want to just start a product for a product because you like it. You want to say, okay, what problem am I solving? And so I started working with people and just building some basic websites. I don't usually do websites with my agency. I was doing it personally so I can learn what their problems are because I wanted, use cases. And so I realized that the booking process can be really difficult with scheduling and booking. And there's all these apps that are kind of, clung together, but not really, there. So it's okay. Maybe I can create a software company. I happen to know how to program as well. So it's a little easier for me. So I said, okay, I'm going to create a software company that serves podcasters and their guests. And so I started there. And then the value proposition, which is my value, is why would they work with me as opposed to anyone else or do nothing at all? And so I started to identify what's the biggest problem with podcasts. Well, most people are doing this as a guest and as a host aren't making any money. So how do I make them profitable? So they actually, and how do I use the system like I have here to actually have, gosh, this crazy idea, make money off a podcast. And so I started that. And then now I'm going through the rest of it. So this is how I actually used it for myself to pivot, because where I was at was a declining area. I'm sure it'll come back at some point. People will travel again. But right now
there's going to be, and it may come back gangbusters because we've all been going, need to travel, need to have an event, need to have an event.
But I got to keep the, you know, keep the house and the mortgage and the heat on and everything else. I have 6 kids, so a little bit more pressure. So it's like, you know, I can't play around. And so I was like, you know, I got to come up with a new idea. And so that's how I applied it. But these same principles can be used for anybody. So if you're in a market and it's declined, what other markets? And you just go through that exercise I mentioned before, the Ansom Matrix, and say, okay, here's the product and services I have. Can I apply those to existing markets? If that's not working, if the existing market you have now is down, like I had, change the market. Don't like stay there. Don't fight it. So many people fight against the tide. What I've always learned, where I've had success in the past, you know, years ago, when I first got worked with all those great companies I mentioned, I rode the SEO wave, you know, search engine optimization. And later on,
that was the buzzword.
That was a buzzword. You know, this was I started that in 1997. It was when I first started doing SEO, and I was way ahead of the curve. Then I was ahead of the next curve, which is AdWords, and had a huge success there. Google, you know, Agency of the Year, etc. Then, you know, what was the next wave that came along? Social media. Now we have the virtual wave. So where you want to have success is ride the wave that's there. Like, don't go against the tide, because a lot of times, even if you're not great at business, so say this is your first business, you don't know what you're doing. A lot of times you can have success just because you're in a market that's growing so much. There's so much demand. Anyone can have success. And so that's kind of how I applied it to myself. But to go back to the framework I mentioned, the results loop, what products and services can you provide your existing markets? Is that, if that's gone, find new markets, or if that doesn't work, can you provide new products and services, which is what I personally did. I said, okay, agency services are not working in this particular market. I could have changed the market, but instead I changed the product and services. And it totally different. So I did something a little bit more risky in a way. Usually you don't want to necessarily change your products and services and your markets. I'm a little crazy because the reason I did this actually is I wanted to prove that this system works. And so what I'm going to do is grow this business to $1 million by my birthday, which is November 16th. And in case anyone wants to send me something by November 16th, I'm going to grow this brand new business to $1 million. And I'm going to do it using my framework so people have a use study. I want more people to see how it exactly.
You're not just telling people about it, you're doing it.
Correct.
Right. So is there one thing that small businesses should be doing right now that they aren't?
Well, again, I want not to sound like a broken record, but I believe they should really have a strategic plan. It doesn't have to be fancy. It could be like like if you're on video, if you see me on video, it's just this right here. You know, just identify your markets, the product and services, and then we didn't talk about the right side of the loop, but essentially know how you're going to grow the number of new buyers, understand how to increase their value, their lifetime value. So get them to buy more stuff. A lot of businesses fail because they get someone to buy something once and their cost for acquiring that customer is too much. And they just don't have anything left. So one of the key things that most businesses do, especially very, very successful enterprises, they have a higher lifetime value. Many times that's because they have what's called a recurring revenue model. So people paying them on almost like a subscription basis, month over month. Those are kind of married together. And then the last one, which is up here, loyalty. So you want to have people come back. And loyalty really consists of 2 things: people coming back to you, and then secondly, them referring you.
They go to Facebook and they say, oh my gosh, Tony is the greatest thing in the world.
Yes. And so usually if you're a brand new company, you go around the loop and you start with getting new buyers, because obviously you don't have any. But if it's a somewhat established company, I always start the loop backwards. So I start with loyalty, because that's usually the lowest hanging fruit and it's very inexpensive. So if you don't have a budget, guess what? You can grow by asking for referrals or getting people to come back again. You know, with this pandemic, one of the things I suggested people do is go through your list of contacts, people that haven't bought in years, or people that were prospects even that didn't buy 5 years ago. Go back to them. That's a lot of times where low hanging fruit is.
Yeah, I tell people, you know, be reaching out on LinkedIn. to find people that you worked with and things like that. And part of it is you might be asking them for a recommendation, but more than anything, it's just to contact them again and say, hey, what you doing? Is there some way that I can be helping you? Tell me more about what you do, because depending on how long it's been, they may have changed. So you can learn something more about them. But yeah, I mean, the way we do business has definitely changed. In the last however many months, and it's not going back to the way we used to. It's going to be kind of a hybrid, meeting in person, maybe meeting in groups, maybe. There's going to be so much more online. And I think that's, now obviously it depends on what your business is. But that's the thing that I think so many people need to figure out, is how are they going to adapt to all of this, to the work from home marketplace. If you sold widgets, then you darn well better be able to get in front of people on their computer, as opposed to going to their door, because even if you show up there, they might not be there, or they might not let you in. And so that's the whole pivot thing. I mean, I think people don't quite understand. They think, well, I did business A and I'm doing business B. No, there is obviously that, but it's, I did business A, and now how am I going to do business A differently? We've seen that obviously with restaurants, with, you can't go and sit down anymore. So you can do takeout, you can do delivery, you can do drive-through, excuse me, all of those things. And of course, restaurants are one of those examples where, for many, I mean, it really is month to month. I don't care how successful the restaurant is. And so that's, I think, why so many are truly struggling. It's not like they had a huge bank of money in that they could do. But, those that have really shifted to do, different things are the ones that are coming through this. And I think we're going to say, hey, I like this, I might go out to a restaurant for something fun, but it's just as great to be able to go and get it and bring it back home and still be in my sweats and t-shirt and have a great meal.
Yeah. It's difficult for these restaurants, or really any business, Restaurants, I think, get a lot of the publicity because they're forward facing, but companies like ours are in the background, the PR agencies, and nobody even talks about them because they're not even aware. But any business, you can't have 20% of the revenue coming in of what it normally is. If you're, in case, if in a lot of areas you're 20% capacity, you can't take an 80% drop in revenue and be sustainable, especially with restaurants, because their margins are so small. Like the amount of profit they make is not enough to sustain them. So it's a very difficult situation. So in their case, particularly, they have to pivot. I've known, gosh, in my town, there's some restaurants that have actually expanded. They really adopted this, and they're actually growing, and they're expanding the kitchen, going to new areas, and they're the ones that are really thriving. The ones that are just struggling are the ones that are just kind of stuck in their old ways.
Yeah, they were waiting for people to be able to come back and sit inside. And it's like, no, and I mean, of course, unfortunately, now that we're going into winter, that's going to cause an entirely different problem. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. But we talked about limited cash flow as being an issue. What are some other red flags that businesses need to be watching to make to know, oh, we might be in trouble?
Yeah, so the cash is definitely the first thing to look at. So when the pandemic hit, first thing I did was I went through my credit card statements and said, okay, what can I renegotiate? In some cases, I called up and said, like my web hosting provider, I said, do you have any benefits for COVID? Yeah, we're actually discounting for 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, the least they're going to tell you is no.
Yeah. In some areas actually paid more. So QuickBooks, I was on their monthly subscription. I said, look, I'm going to use this all year anyway. I'm going to switch that to annual. And so I went through and really just started there. So that's the first thing you want to do. But really, the two red flags is cash, and really, to keep it simple, how much is coming in and when is it coming in? So the how much is your profitability. And so, like I said, there's two ways to affect that. Bring in more money, so get new clients and go back to past clients like we talked about, wherever you can, get more revenue in, and also reduce your costs. So, which I just hit on a minute ago. So renegotiate, see if you can get discount pricing, etc. That's the first one, which is the amount, how much. When is your cash flow? And so cash flow, you want to delay what's going out. So see if you can renegotiate having payment terms extended, et cetera, and then expedite what's coming in. So call up your clients, make sure you're getting paid on time. What I've always done with my agency, which I learned again from the corporate world, is you bill in advance. So a lot of people bill after, or they'll bill some industrial companies don't get paid for 6 months, a year after they bank the thing, which is a huge cash crunch, especially in times like this. So look and say, okay, can I get paid in advance? That little thing will give you another 30 days of revenue. It's like, that's like almost 10% growth right there, if you look at it over the course of the year. And so you want to look at those two key things. So how much, which is profitability, cash flow, when is it coming in?
Right. And it's all about communication with people. You talk about when you invoice, maybe you used to invoice on the last day of the month. Okay. Now you're going to invoice still maybe on the last day of the month, but you tell them, hey, you know what? I'll give you a 10% discount if you pay by the 15th.
Yeah.
Exactly. and so, just little things like that, because you're taking a little bit of a hit, but you're getting the money more quickly.
Correct. Yeah. Time is so critical. It's a lot of times people don't think about the time value of money, but that's really a key thing, because when you have that money, you can reinvest it, you can pay off debt, et cetera. And so the timing is probably more important than the amount, which is why it makes sense to discount in many cases.
Right. And it is interesting because, like I said, we're not going back to normal. I'm putting that in my fun little air quotes, because I think so many people, small and large business, I mean, it'd be interesting, and there's probably this stat out there. I mean, back in March, everybody went to work from home. I mean, unless you were a brick and mortar place where people, and even if people weren't coming into you, you still, say you're Walmart, you still had people in the store working all of those things. But, but I wonder now what it is, how many people are still working from home. And I'm guessing it's still a big majority of things. And, as from a business perspective, that gets challenging, because we don't always have the right equipment, all of those various things. But, what are some other things that you can talk about that make a home business successful?
Yeah. So thankfully I moved. It's kind of funny because my agency was in Rhode Island. I live in Connecticut. And I honestly hated going there. I'd go there once or 2 days a week. I was like, this stinks. So back in October, I actually made the shift to remote work. So I did it well in advance. And essentially we were remote before that because no one wanted to go to the office.
Right.
So I'm just
and with what you do, virtual works perfect.
Yeah. So I made this call a long time ago. So we are well ahead of the curve. So the critical things you want to focus on for working remote is communication. And so one of the things I did was increase the amount communication I had with my team. So meeting in the morning via Zoom, meeting in the afternoon via Zoom. You also have to have good systems set up. So and this is a basic thing for any business, but a lot of small business owners, especially out of the gates, don't have systems in place. So make sure you have documented processes, checklists. Checklist Manifesto is a great book. Or if you look at the Michael Gerber books, on E-Myth, et cetera, he talks a lot about that. But you want to have really good processes. And then accountability. You want to make sure you have accountability. So what you don't want to do is do what, I mean, it seems like it's a trend now, but like surveillance, I'm going to watch my employees and have video cameras.
I'm going to put the keystroke counter thingy.
Yeah. Bad idea. Cause if you ruin trust, you got nothing. And so what you're better off doing is holding your employees accountable, just like your clients would. And that is for the results.
Right.
So what results are they doing?
Do you get it done at midnight? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to always tell my team, look, if you get something done in advance, then, take the rest of the day off. Right. It doesn't matter to me.
Sitting there staring at your computer screen just because you think I'm going to make you. No.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the whole idea of working for specified hours is going to be changed, hopefully, through this. And people are going to work more for the results. Right. So that means delivering what you say you're going to deliver. If you get it done early, great. Move on to something else, or, stop working or whatever. But I think you have to have, but to do that, you have to have the systems in place. Right. And so that way you can hold people accountable. So I'm not saying don't hold people accountable.
Right. They still have to do the work.
Yeah. And so with my agency, we actually moved to a point-based system. So points. So instead of clients paying a specified amount for whatever you're going to just get the service, that service, et cetera. Instead, we had a point system, which the client would pay for points that they could then distribute across any area. But then likewise, the employees could be accountable to the point system. So we can know how many points. So that way there's a correlation between what they actually deliver and what the clients receive. And that's a good way to understand their value and also how you can bonus them and things like that.
Right. You know, and you mentioned having the processes and having them written down. You know, it's funny. That's something we should always have, but we've gotten away from that. You know, we should always know that if we're doing project X, here are the steps that it takes to do that. Because pandemic aside, people took vacations, people quit, people passed away, people got sick, you know, all those various things. And of course, it was big job security if nobody knew what little part you did. But that's not job security. That's just, you know, it might be job security, but no, you know, don't do that. You know, and, you know, even if it's a small thing, like, you know, I do this, then I send this email. I do this, then I, you know, because if you haven't done it yourself, you're not going to know those steps. You know, and so it's always good just to have that down. And then it could be that you can easily, you know, in some cases go through and go, ooh, what if we did this, then this, and skip that part, or, you know, all those things. And so you can be improving your processes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, the processes. And I've always found you actually can scale better when you have the processes. So one of the things I learned as an employee, because when I first started, I honestly had that mindset. It's like, because I knew SEO. I was like the only one that knew SEO.
Right. So you weren't going to train anybody how to do it.
Which is why I was getting into these big companies, Ford and all these, you know, AutoNation, whatever. It was because I knew this. A lot of people didn't. But then I started having so much work, I couldn't handle it.
Right. Yeah.
Ridiculous. So then I totally shifted the other way and said, look, I'm going to teach everyone everything I know. And that was actually what enabled me to rise higher and higher to the point where I got to meet, you know, work with the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And so you're always better off letting go. Don't hold tightly to things, let go and distribute. And it's the same thing with like the manifesto. I put my best stuff in there. I'm not like holding it back.
You gave it away.
Give it away. Yeah. So the more you can give, the better it will be for yourself.
Right. You know, and let's talk about giving, because one of the things that you are a very firm believer in is what you call positive change.
Yes.
You know, and I loved looking on your website because for you, you know, you know, I love this. A big part of being successful is being able to give back.
Yeah.
You know, and so talk to us more about why that's so important. And, you know, at any scale, I mean, you know, maybe it's that you do go buy a box of Girl Scout cookies, or maybe you donate $1 million to build, you know, a new building. But, you know, talk to us about why you think it's so important for businesses to do what you call positive change.
Yeah. So, I mean, a basic premise is you give and you'll receive, and that's across so many, you know, faiths. It's not even funny, but, you know, as a Christian, that's definitely one of the key parts of my life is to give, because when you give, you receive.
Right.
But you don't do it for receiving. You do it because I mean, for me, there's so many benefits, but you feel good about yourself when you impact someone else. You know, it's so much. I mean, you could buy another sports car, but what impact does it have if you get some child in, you know, we happen to give a lot of money into Africa, you know, what if you give someone that doesn't even have a meal, something, what kind of impact does that have? So the question is, do you want to have an impact in your life, or you want to just be self-serving? And I choose to make an impact, because what's the point of what's the point of life if you're not impacting?
It comes back to you can't take it with you.
Yeah, you can't. So why do it? So that's why I try to give in many different areas. As much as, I mean, you know, sometimes things are tighter than others. You do what you can, but you know, it's always been a passion to connect it to. And also from an employment perspective, you want to have employees that support you. And so when you have a vision and mission and purpose bigger than yourself, that's something that other people can get behind. You know, there's always been that joke where the driver, you know, the boss of the company drives up in the Lamborghini, and then he says, hey, you know, if you work hard, you know, someday you'll, you know, maybe next year, I'll be able to get another one of these. What kind of motivation is that for people?
Yeah. So, I'm like, do I care? No.
Yeah. So you have to have a mission. And I think a mission that's bigger than yourself. And also it sees you through the hard times. So if you are working just for money and you hit a low point, you're going to be crushed, depression. I mean, there's there's just a major CEO of, you know, Zappos, you know, I forget his last name, but Tony.
Right. Oh yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, he had it all
He had it all.
and didn't.
He died actually not too far from where I live. He died.
Right.
And he sold the company, he lost his purpose,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm not going to judge him one way or the other, whatever happened. But the point is, you want to have a purpose that's bigger than you, because God forbid, if everything gets wiped away, how are you going to sustain yourself through that? And so giving is another way to help make things bigger than yourself.
Yeah. And obviously each person has a different scale. We're not saying, that you should, only be driving, the 20-year-old car and, because, we want to feel good too.
Sure.
But it is something, give back what you can, and in some cases it really is just you, it's been hard, especially because we can't go and physically volunteer right now. But there are still so many things that you could be doing, even if you're not writing that check, to be able to help out. And I think a lot of people think, well, it takes a lot of money. No, it doesn't. I mean, sometimes $20 makes a big difference.
It does.
And so, or, you're driving along, you've been through the drive-through and you see the guy on the street corner that doesn't have a meal. Okay, give him your Big Mac. You can go home and make yourself a sandwich, or you can go back through and get yourself another Big Mac. But it's
it's amazing. That's one of the lessons I give my wife credit for this. She thought of this, but we have I'm in the Northeast. Dunkin' Donuts is pretty popular up here. I like Starbucks too, but one of the things we do is we buy gift cards, $5 gift cards, and our kids will literally spot people that are homeless, and they're like, pull over, and we'll put that, and they'll hand out the card. So we're actually teaching our kids at a very young age to be givers. And it's great because, sometimes I'll be like, they're all on the way on the other side of the road. I want to pull, and they like push me.
And they're like, no, we're turning around.
Exactly. So it's amazing.
Right. Yeah. Because we all hesitate to give cash. I mean, for a variety of reasons.
Yes.
But one of the things, and I'll be honest, this is one of those that I always think, oh, that looks good. And then I haven't done it. The little bag. So it's like a Ziploc bag, and it's got, like, now it would be good to have a pair of gloves in there. A little a mask. A gift card to, say, McDonald's, Starbucks, something like that, so that that what they're getting isn't, in many cases, some of them might be using, if they got cash, to buy something that they might not be, and just a variety of things. I mean, like, one of the things that I've seen is, if you are seeing a lot of women, well, maybe some sanitary products. I mean, I hate to bring that up, but that's, one of those things.
Sure.
And and so it's just, so you've made these little Ziploc bags, you can easily toss them, not be careful throwing them out, but, and I always, we sometimes have, little bags of dog food in the car that we see, and we give out when we see somebody who's standing there and has a pet with them. So I mean, it's little things like that. And then if you can do something big, that's great too. But it is something, and especially now, because we're all, I tell people it's the Corona crankies. So whatever we can do, it's going to make them feel better, but we'll be honest, it makes us feel better too.
Oh yeah, there's nothing like the feeling you get after giving something to somebody. I remember being on the streets of Boston with my son, and we got a big grinder. And he's like, can we give half of it to this homeless person? Because we kind of both felt bad because we walked by him. Here we are because we're going to see a Celtics game. And it's like, so we turned around and gave it to him. And then that was something, again, my son never forgot. I still remember it today. And it's like those things like that really make an impact. I think a lot of times the smaller things make a bigger impact because you're touching an individual. When you're just giving at a corporate level, something big, you don't really see the end result as much as giving it to someone. So, point is, do something small, take that small step, just like I talked about before. Right. It's not about doing the big things, it's taking small steps. And it's really about diligence, doing it repeatedly, like the habits you have. That's really what is going to determine how far and where you go.
Right. I love it. Well, oh my gosh, Tony, we are at the top of the hour. We could continue. I tell people this is why I set a timer, because we could just keep going. But tell people how they find you and connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to hear more stories and get an example, free templates, like I said, I put the best stuff I have from my book in this manifesto. All you do is go to smallstepsmanifesto.com. You can download it. If you want to connect with me personally, just go to my website, meettonyg.com. You scroll all the way to the bottom and you can get to me on social media. LinkedIn is probably the best place, from business perspective.
Great. You're not going to make people spell your last name.
No, Meet Tony G. I picked that up a while ago because I didn't want to have anyone suffer through that pain of trying to spell it out.
I know your 6 kids are still like, how do we spell this?
We're gonna be stuck in we're gonna be stuck in kindergarten for a while until we figure
because they can't spell it to get out of there. So, well, Tony, this really has been great. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Oh gosh, you know what? You mentioned this before, but we really only have 3 main resources: our time, money, and effort. And so that's where I go back to slow down or speed up. So if the one thing that's central to all this is you want to slow down and speed up, if you can, use my strategic plan. If you don't want to, find something else. But the point is, write down what you want to accomplish, because you can't accomplish something until you define what it is.
Right.
And that's really where you want to start. So go out there, make it simple. Don't do something too complicated, and just take action. That's the key. So you got to know what to do, how to do it, and then take action. If you do those 3 things, you're going to accomplish whatever you want to do in life.
Perfect. I love it. Well, this really has been so much fun, and I can't wait to do it again. But until then, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having a great conversation with Tony Guarnaccia. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.